Hello, my friend.
Hello, good to see you. You're back home. You've been traveling a lot, so it's good to
A
see you
little
back
bit.
home.
Yes, it's nice to see you as well. Happy spring in
Yeah.
the United States.
Happy spring. It's so good to start to see the sun a little bit longer in the sky. It's always a good thing.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
well, I'm excited today. We have someone from the UK, Hema Kariyappa. She is the lead solution architect for VodafoneThree, and she was one of our winners of the Digital Innovation Award back in 2025. You know, we just kicked off our award season for 2026, which is really exciting, and so it's great to have one of our winners from last year to join us on the stage. So maybe we could bring Hema on the stage.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello,
Good
welcome.
afternoon.
Thank you
Well,
for having me.
So nice
yeah,
to see you.
and
Thanks for
it's
joining us.
Nice to see all of
so
you. It's
great
amazing
to
to have
have you.
smiling faces.
Yes. Well, we're very excited to talk to you because you've got a very interesting role that we can explore, dive into. So maybe we'll say goodbye to Haley just for a minute, and we can have a little chat.
Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it.
So, Hema, you are a lead solution architect at Vodafone, which sounds like, what kind of role is that? It sounds very important. Could you just give us a little bit as to what you do at Vodafone and really how did you get there?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, thanks to you, Louise, and thanks to ISG for having me today. Did I say your name correct? Is it Louis? Louise?
Lois, yes. Thank you for
Yes, yes.
asking. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And, when you asked me this question, the first thing that occurred to me is how um, easily we can take our titles or our jobs for granted. And it's not till you
Mm,
asked me what it is that you really do that I had to think back hard. And as I started listing what I do, I started taking pride in everything that I am able to do. So here is my
mm,
pitch. This is what I do essentially. In short, consultancy and design. But to elaborate on that, I leverage years of my experience in the industry. So I advise, I challenge, I repair, migrate, transform systems and processes. And I do these through my technical designs, to build compliant,
mm,
safe, and strategic or even tactical solutions for my stakeholders. And these are usually, my stakeholders are usually business stakeholders. They can be commercially driven for their chosen markets. They can be driven by regulatory or compliance factors. And in most cases, especially large organizations like VodafoneThree, we are always trying to keep up with an ever changing landscape of technology and customer needs. So it pushes us to modernize and reinvent to continue to serve their customers. So I am that bridge between what business stakeholders would like to achieve and what technology enables them to do. And I've been now working for 26 years. That's probably showing my age. It's been a growth.
mm.
It's been a growth that has spanned countries and continents. I started out as a software developer for a startup in Mumbai, in India, and then migrated to UK during the IT boom. And this is where I've grown professionally, working largely across Europe, US, and Asia. So that's what I've been doing all this while. It's UK has been my base for the past 2 decades now.
Well, that's great. That's wonderful to hear. But it sounds like you started as a software engineer, started
Yes,
in technology right away. So is that something,
absolutely.
was it kind of a calling as you were going through your younger education, or did you fall into it? Like how, because this is a pretty technical role that you're performing.
It
So how'd you
is.
get
It
there?
is. Yes. And, all along, I kept thinking to myself that I fell into it. But then again, I had to think long and hard of my journey. And I have definitely come to the conclusion that, you know, I pursued this. So I had to
Mm,
change my own story in my head. And how did I pursue this? So I grew up in India, and in India during the time when I was growing up and I was in school, the two main fields were largely science and engineering, well, medicine and engineering. And I grew up actually wanting to be a doctor throughout my school, throughout my student life. I wanted to be a doctor, neurosurgeon to be precise. So when I got to the crossroads of the Indian education system where a student has to make a choice, and it's for at that point in time, it is quite a huge choice for a student to make between engineering and medicine. I was quite amazed at how easily the mystery and charm of computers that had started making its presence
Oh,
last couple of years had completely wiped out my childhood dream of becoming a doctor. And I remember applying for engineering. There was a choice between these fields, and without hesitation, despite wanting to be a doctor, I chose engineering. And yet, fate or destiny gave me another opportunity to rethink my decision because the college didn't have a seat in engineering. They didn't have a place. They put me into
oh,
medicine for the first 3 months. And again, I was really restless and uninterested. So, when a place did become available in the engineering section for computer science specifically in that same college, I leapt at that opportunity, or rather, my hand shot up without losing a moment. So when I think back, that moment of raising my hand, that definitely did it for me. So I have pursued this technical career.
wow. That's really a great story. And I find it very interesting just culturally too, that there's a point in time that you have to make a decision. I guess we all have that in our lives. We make these decisions and sometimes we feel like, oh, I must have just fell into it. I don't know how I got here, but we all make these critical decisions throughout our career. But, this is a pretty demanding career that you found yourself in. I mean, it's pretty hard to keep up that momentum, to keep up that education, working with so many stakeholders. Like, were there times that you're just like, this is too much? It's hard for me to continue, or just, can you think of times that you've maybe struggled with it and you had to kind of pull yourself up through this?
Well, with such a long career, there have been ups and downs, haven't there? So, and I could probably list down a lot of such scenarios. But when I look back now, and this is my take, I feel that although there were challenges when I was working, actively working and engaged in professional activities, I don't think I don't think of them as challenges now, because at work, however frustrating in that moment, in that period, however frustrating they may be, they are usually satisfying once you've surmounted, because on hindsight, you've got key lessons learned, and it makes you grow, it makes you mature, you see things differently. For me personally, the most challenging moments have been when I haven't been working in my
Mm.
chosen field. Excuse me. So so there were two specific occasions. One was, of course, during the last stage of my year-long maternity leave, when I was actively engaged, and then I took maternity leave to have my daughter. And much later, when I was made to let go by an organization that I'd worked for a decade. They had merged. So in those moments is when I questioned my choice of career and priorities. So thinking back to that time, I still remember, I wanted to be a doctor, and yet I was working with machines. I had a daughter, and clearly, my priority was my daughter, but I also wanted to go back to work at the same time after about a gap of 8 or 9 months. But then to go back and work with machines, is that really what I wanted? So those are the points, those are key moments in life when you think again, is this again another decision making point in my life? And I'll also, what I also wanted to delve into was this slight disillusionment that I had in that period in the 2000s. Having, wanting to move from being a medical doctor, wanting to work with people, but, continuing to work with machines, automating stuff. I I was slightly disillusioned by what I was doing back then, because it felt very far removed from the real world. I didn't think I was making any real contribution back then. It didn't feel like it was soul satisfying work because I wasn't able to take a step back and appreciate the larger picture of what was unfolding back in the 2000s. I was working on projects that were, looking to change the banking process, automating the banking process, if you will, or changing consumers' habits through online shopping. So I couldn't put these changes into context because these were small changes that were happening in the grand scheme of things, but I wasn't able to put that into context. But I did stick through. I stuck with my career choice. I said, no, this is what I believe that there is some merit to continuing in this. And of course, one of the other reasons was financial independence. It was a priority for me. And now I had a child. So I wanted to be able to, bring her up with certain opportunities and advantages. So I'm glad I stuck to that. And the reason I'm saying this is, despite them being challenges and me being disillusioned, there came a time where I started putting more intention into my work and I began to see the larger picture. And working for the telco industry now, I've been working for them for the last 25 years, talking to business stakeholders. I began to see the bigger problems that they were looking to solve or a new way of living. They wanted to innovate new ways of living. So that started inspiring me and making me feel very excited about the significant changes. So now when I look back, I feel my world now is so different to when I was growing up. And I can take pride in saying that I had some contribution into building that world. If we look at the COVID times, I worked in the telco industry. So during the COVID times, ours was considered one of the essential services that kept going during lockdown. Or even, this kind of realization makes me feel that I'm glad I stuck to what I was doing. And I did fall into the telco sector quite by accident, so that was not by design. But the fact that I was in the engineering field wanting to work with computers, I think that this has served me well. I mean, having to growing up in an era when you were writing letters to people, which would take days, to now, instantly interacting like this.
Yeah,
And yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and let's not
It's
forget
really true.
yeah, and let's not forget the pragmatic reason. This career does pay very well. It was one of those first careers, other than financial, that paid quite handsomely. So you kind of get addicted to a certain lifestyle. So for
Yeah.
me, I think money is also an enabler of my hobbies and personal projects. So yeah.
It's interesting as I was hearing you talk. I think so many of our guests, I have found a theme where they were able to take something they were passionate about, and you talked about things that were important to you or how you were helping, whether it be societies around you or different large, kind of as the world unfolds and technology becomes more available, and how we can help enable people and companies work more effectively. Like there's a desire that you are, that you feel, and that you can marry things that you personally just have some passion around with your job. And I think that's exciting. And I see that commonly amongst women on this show. And it truly is a great combination to help propel success. So I wonder, as technology unfolds, like we're in this rapid pace of change. And I think there's this, how does one harness that and take advantage of, and be on top of it? How do we continue to learn what is happening in technology to be relevant and to be able to achieve the things that we want to do? Do you have any recommendations for us to, how do you keep on top of things in what is a very rapid changing world?
Let me say, with great difficulty. It's not easy. It
Yeah.
doesn't come easy. And it requires a lot of intention. Requires a lot of juggling of priorities. That is a short answer, I would say. But I do want to elaborate on that. As I said, in my early career, and I've learned this along the way, because in my early career, I wasn't very mindful or intentional about keeping up to date, and I didn't expect computers to be that rapidly evolving. So it took a bit of a wake up call sometimes, because back then I thought, you know what, my job will teach me what I want to learn. And I was fairly reactive, and I was working on Unix, Linux systems, which were all quite machine to machine interfaces, if you will, as a software developer. And then came Java, which made us think slightly out of the box, because you're suddenly thinking object oriented programming. So on that one project where I had to change my thinking from using what I was already using, a programming tool, to now change my approach, that taught me a lesson to expect the unexpected. And back then my world of influence were also my immediate colleagues, family and friends whom I interacted with the most. And internet was just making inroads, so we were talking to people via emails, which was still fairly quicker than letters. But having worked in the Unix Linux environment, there were a lot of forums, technical forums, that were made available to us. So it was quite liberating to know that, one could speak to anyone, ask and receive answers, brainstorm, be inspired and energized. So I saw that as, camaraderie across boundaries to build something new and grow. And this was the culture for startups and the Silicon Valley back then, during the IT boom stage. And I believe that set the tone for how I evolved as a person who had to keep pace with whatever that's changing. But you could get lost in the myriad of changes that are happening, isn't it? You could run like a headless chicken, which I found I was doing on some occasions myself. And so you need to take some time off, that quiet time off. And what I found was that in order to keep learning, I had to be aligned with my own values, and and how inspired I am based on what's going on around my world, to see how that world gets impacted. And so, once I found my value system, that's when, then keeping pace didn't become difficult. But what did become difficult was finding the time to stay up to date. And I don't know how this will be received, but I do believe that youngsters do have an advantage in that, because they don't have many encumbrances. So it's easy to find the time to be able to juggle many things. And back then for me, MOOCs like Coursera and Udemy, these kind of online free courses, focus chat groups, lunch and learn sessions, reading newsletters, subscribing to them, all of this came quite easily. Now, as one gets older and builds a family, you've got competing priorities. It's a challenge. So to stay relevant, it has to come from within, I believe. And I feel that, when people say they don't have time, I say they don't have time because they're not prioritizing it. Once it's something that you prioritize, you will somehow make time for it. But on a daily basis, it is a struggle to recalibrate and prioritize. And right now, I find that AI is, all pervasive everywhere. So
Yeah.
I try and stay engaged by talking to colleagues, working on projects. I've got to find the time to go on a course, but this is, my current priority and agenda, to upskill myself on AI.
Yeah, I know. It's someone told me they created a chat, or not a chat, a AI engine that every day it would go out and purview. I think it was our last guest, actually. She said, go out and purview what's out there and kind of bring together a summary of what's
Yeah,
out there. I
yeah,
mean, you're right. And then how do you use technology to help you manage all of all of the things that you have on your plate and grapple with? So
yeah.
it's, yeah, being creative and really learning.
Yeah,
And
make those
so I,
micro changes. Yeah,
yeah,
take advantage of the technology, but then also recalibrate with your value system. How much of
yeah.
technology do you want pervading your life, and is it helpful or is it disruptive?
That's a really good point. Yeah, the number of minutes I see myself on games sometimes on my phone is probably not good for me. You mentioned about, I guess looking at many of young now as a very different world than what we had growing up. But one of the things that you are very involved in, you're global co-chair of the Women in Tech for Vodafone Group, which is fantastic. And I'm sure, as many of us who have been in this technology world for a while, it's like you want to look back and help bring this next generation or the next couple of generations forward. And so there's a role that we can play both personally, and there's a role that our companies should play. And so I'm just curious, in your role in this group, what is it that you are personally wanting to achieve in that role? And also, what can companies do that is not just talking about what they the right words to use, but actually being able to achieve and getting
Walk the talk. Yeah.
more women into a male dominated
Yeah.
sort of an industry and really help foster that?
I'm so glad you asked me this question because the global co-chair of Women in Tech, that role is a voluntary role and something that I have passionately and wholeheartedly embraced. And the reason for that is because there is momentum, there is a lot of talk, world is changing, but there is still much to be done. And my single most pivotal reason for doing this, and around which everything else revolves, is for women to gain recognition for their roles and be acknowledged, rewarded, and, dare I say, elevated for their contributions. And for the one reason that they shouldn't have to compete with men, whatever their field. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to be in a world where each one is a person of ability rather than a man or a woman of ability? That, I don't know. That's probably asking for too much. It's utopia. We've started taking baby steps, but I think, but that's how I was brought up. I was raised to not um, be defined by my gender. I was raised as a person. Um, not limited because of my gender, but I was able to do things or not able to do things based on my own personal growth, my own strengths and weaknesses as a person of this world. So it was only when I started um, gaining some sort of maturity as a teenager, going into schools and colleges, going into the professional world, that I started noticing all the biases and the disadvantages, and found, I had to fight those entrenched, unhelpful beliefs. So, in this organization, that is my that's my goal. That's my end goal. That we do not have to have a women in technology group,
Mm,
right? And that would be wonderful, where
like that.
there is true equality and each one is recognized as a person rather than and a person of certain abilities and skill sets rather than based on gender, race, ethnicity, or even class for that matter. And where I think organizations and what role can they do specifically, I do believe um, that they could do this tangibly, and I believe that this would be very effective, is for them to introduce a very strong sponsorship and allyship program. And I'm not just talking about mentorship or coaching. When you employ a person who's already recognized as being of a minority group, whichever minority group you want to define them into, partner them with an overarching sponsor and an ally network almost immediately. So you've got a mentor, you've got coaching, you're training the person, but also have that support network of an overarching sponsor and ally network, so that as they grow, they become advocates. The sponsors and allies become advocates for this person. And then when that one person grows, moves up, a family, the family grows, the community grows. And I think so. Yeah, I'm a strong proponent of sponsorship and allyship, and not just at the top level. Started from the graduate level. Started from
That's great.
basic
Yeah.
ground up.
We have a program in ISG as well, and we struggle. It took a while. It's a lot of energy, right? But and it takes a while to get momentum going, but you're right. It just, then when the blocks start to be laid in place, it really can
Can stack up.
uplift, and
They do.
it's fantastic to be a part of it, but also we can see the benefit that it gives. So, as you may know, we always ask our prior guests to ask a question of our future guests. And we had a guest, Vavi Kantz from Austria 2 weeks ago. And she's an AI expert and a consultant. And she has kind of a long question, so I'm just going to read it, but it's a great question. So I'm excited to hear your answer. She said, throughout my career, some of my best and most energizing collaborations have been with women in deeply technical roles. There have always been a shared language and this particular way of approaching problems that I just can't fully explain or put into words. How we innovate is it distinctly something that's ours? So Hema, you've built a career at a genuinely technical heart of telecom in the rooms that are overwhelmingly male. And you've been recognized for it with ISG Digital Innovation Award, as well as other awards. So her ask is, what is your secret sauce when it comes to digital innovation? And do you think being a woman in that space is part of that?
Absolutely. It's got everything to do with being a woman. And my secret sauce, which I think gets taken for granted or is easily dismissed, is empathy. I work in the architecture space, and I strongly believe that architecture is what makes empathy executable. And so, being a woman, I will state this with pride and without invitation to challenge that women are known to be more empathetic. We can see beyond what's visible, and we work in that multidimensional way that only women can. So, not for nothing women are credited to be creators. So I believe that while one can deliver systems, you can set processes in place, you can build applications to solve a problem. If it's not wrapped in empathy across the entire life cycle, from concept to delivery and even after, you really have not innovated. You've only simply built a structure. Empathy breathes life into it. And so I work in telco, which is all about connection. So that connection has to be meaningful. So empathy.
That's it's the basis, right? And if you build
It is.
empathy in the basis, what a great answer. So our next guest is Shireen Baha. She is our 2025 Rising Star in APAC. And she's a project manager, at Network Science, which there's probably a kindred spirit. And do you have a question for her?
I do actually. You did tell me that I should pose a question. It is Shireen Bajaj, if I've got this right. She's
Yeah.
from India. And I've gone through her resume. It's very impressive. So this is my question. And again, it's quite a lengthy question. No pressure, Shireen. She's worked, so her internship has been in defense and in the medicine industry, also in big techs as well as energy. So at a very young age, you've worked across fields that I believe are powerful, impactful, and have the potential to change the course of lives. So that's defense and hospitals, medicine, big tech, energy. So this is impressive, it's envious, and it's also a testament to your sharp intelligence. With it, it also brings some amount of responsibility because of the multidimensional nature of the skill sets that you have now gained, and especially in a country that has both exciting challenges and opportunities. So, these worlds you worked in, my question is that they all run on the same problem, which is making high stakes decision with incomplete data. So, as a young person equipped with the knowledge you've gained from such diverse fields, I am keen to know this. If you were handed the resources tomorrow to build that one product, and I ask this because she's defined as a product manager. So I said, if you were to build one product that solves that problem in a way nobody has yet, what would you build, and who would this be for? No pressure, Shireen. I know
Wow,
it's quite a big ask.
that's a big ask, but that's a fantastic question. And I think we're going to need to get that question to her quickly so that she has
Yes,
time
she
to
can,
really
because
think
I'm
that
really
through.
impressed I'm really impressed at the fields that she's worked in, defense and aims, as well as
Yeah.
energy organizations. It's so enviable at such an early age.
Yeah, so we're excited to
Yeah.
speak with her in a few weeks. Well, great. So we'll bring Haley back. on the stage.
What a great conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hema. I
Thank you for the
so
opportunity.
appreciated the introspection and the generous sharing of your reflections. So thank you so much.
Thank you once again to ISG for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, and we thank everybody for watching. And join us in a couple of weeks where we can hear the answer to that amazing question that was just asked of our next guest. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.